So I just got off a Zoom with TikTok's lawyer, the one who is handling the arguments in front of the Federal Circuit Court on the TikTok ban. I have like 4 thoughts that I wanted to discuss after this meeting, and I am also a lawyer. I'm a 17-year trial lawyer. I am not an appellate practitioner, and I have certainly never argued in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. I have argued in front of the Seventh Circuit, which is basically at the same appellate level as the Federal Circuit, which is the court that just issued the opinion upholding the ban on TikTok. There are 4 main hurdles, a couple of which are legal and a couple of which are not really legal, that I see in front of TikTok and its pursuit of overturning the ban. Number 1 is the stay pending appeal. What does that mean? So the Federal Circuit just issued an opinion that upholds the TikTok ban. Obviously, TikTok is going to appeal that decision. But what happens in the meantime? Because this law is technically supposed to go in effect on January 19th. That's like right around the corner. That's obviously not enough time for SCOTUS to review arguments, to hear oral arguments, and then to issue a decision overturning the Federal Circuit's upholding of the ban if that's what SCOTUS wants to do, right? In order to keep the status quo, i.e. keep TikTok from not being banned in the interim, TikTok needs to obtain a stay pending appeal. But in order to do that, they need to pass this test. They essentially need to show that people will be irreparably harmed unless there is an order that stays everything, that keeps everything in this status quo pending appeal. That's going to be really hard. If you actually read the opinion issued by the Federal Circuit, they've already said that they don't think that the harm that would result from this ban is as egregious as the harm that would result from not allowing the ban to go forward. And it's already said that they have denied the request for a temporary injunction, which is very similar to a stay pending appeal. But even if they were able to secure a stay pending appeal, an appeal is not guaranteed here. I think a lot of people think that, oh, sure, no, the Supreme Court has to hear a case. That's true in state court, but we're not in state court, we're in federal court, which means that the Supreme Court is literally the Supreme Court of the entire land. That's the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court of the United States is not required to accept appeal. They can deny appeals and say, we don't even want to hear it. So there's no guarantee that TikTok even gets an appeal and even gets to argue in front of the Supreme Court. It's very possible that this current decision by the Federal Circuit is the final say on this TikTok ban. TikTok lawyer is very optimistic that SCOTUS will grant cert and accept an appeal and at least listen to some of their arguments. But I'm going to tell you right now, SCOTUS grants cert on less than 1% of appeals. So statistically speaking, it is highly unlikely that SCOTUS will grant cert, even if the Supreme Court of the United States accepts cert and decides to listen to this appeal. We have an issue that is very apparent if you read the Federal Circuit opinion. These people don't know what TikTok is. They very flagrantly dismiss the irreparable harm that this will cause, not just TikTok, the company, obviously, but the 170 million people who use TikTok on a daily basis. They're basically like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? We have a national security issue. And that's really all they care about. And of course, the national security issue has not really been proven with any evidence that has been made available to any of us. So we look at this phantom monster out there that nobody really understands. But what that reveals to me is the abject lack of understanding that these judges have about what TikTok actually is and what it means to the users and creators of TikTok. I don't think that's going to go away with the Supreme Court. Part of the reason the court is pretty much dismissing the irreparable harm that this will cause us, the creators of TikTok, is because the act provides sort of a safety latch. It's the divestiture option. Every time TikTok tried to argue, hey, like this is a really bad law for the First Amendment. This is going to set some really bad precedents for not just us, but for a lot of different people. It's also unconstitutional on its face because it's obviously targeting TikTok in this really punitive way. Every time TikTok tries to make that argument, this Federal Circuit is like, oh, yeah, but you got the divestiture option. You got the divestiture. Just do the divestiture. It's really frustrating because they think that like, oh, the divestiture is just going to fix everything. And it's like so easy easy to do, and you can totally do it in the time frame. And you know what? Even the president's allowed to give you an extension on that. So why don't you just save us all the trouble and do the divestiture? But of course, the divestiture doesn't make any sense because the Chinese government has already said that they are not going to sell or allow for the divestment or divestiture of the algorithm, which is essentially what makes TikTok TikTok. So we go back again to the circle of like, they don't understand what TikTok is. They don't understand what the value of TikTok is. They don't understand how much TikTok has essentially changed the world. They certainly don't understand how TikTok has changed so many of our lives, including my own life. This divestiture thing is pretty much a red herring. I mean, I don't know if that's the best analogy, but it's like this nice, handy little excuse. It gives not just the Federal Circuit, but potentially SCOTUS this nice little option of, oh, we don't need to do the hard work to protect people's First Amendment rights. We've got this nice little divestiture option here. Thank you so much. So those are my 4 thoughts on the TikTok ban. What does that mean? What's going to happen on January 19th if there isn't a stay pending appeal, or worse yet, if the Federal Circuit is just upheld? In every sense of the word, it spells catastrophe for TikTok. Unless they negotiate some sort of divestiture that the government is willing to accept, or some other type of protocol that the government is willing to accept. There are all sorts of political issues that may cloud sort of our ability to read what's going to happen in the future. We've heard rumblings that there are members of Trump's cabinet who are very pro TikTok. Not sure what they're going to be able to do since the deadline is January 19th, though. My expectation is that TikTok is moving on parallel paths here. They are obviously going to be pursuing every single legal remedy before SCOTUS or otherwise. They may even have other lawsuits in the pipeline to help fray some of the risk that we're seeing. But I'm also assuming that they are working day and night to negotiate some sort of divestiture or other type of option with the U.S. government that will appease not just the current administration, but the next administration. What does that mean? It likely means that even if TikTok is saved as of January 19th, 2025, it may look fundamentally different than the app that we are currently experiencing. I think nostalgically, that makes me a little bit sad. I joined TikTok as a consumer because I recognized its potential as a mobilization of activism, of the things that can happen when we come together on an app that helps to amplify voices that have previously been suppressed. It can change the world. It's done so in incredibly powerful ways, and it's also opened my eyes to my own obligations as an advocate for human rights in general. And I don't know, it just makes me really sad that this might be happening.